you to, because our time is actually quite precious, like maybe to invite like each one of you to super briefly introduce yourself. I think you're probably most familiar with Tim, so probably no introduction there needed. But then from our three other speakers, Spring is the second time TL Around the World speaker. And like I said, last year there were no one else from Asia. So I'm really glad to see so many diverse faces here today. Susan, I think, is a many times like speaker, and Yiqing is his first time. And so I would just like to ask you guys to maybe super briefly introduce yourself, but then also to share like what brought you here, like what is your passion, reason, and connection to our like panel actually called East Meets West, looking at teal from around the world this hour of the day. Yeah, so maybe I'll, as always, start using my screen like order and start with Susan.
Kia ora, everyone. Just such a thrill to be here. I was just overwhelmed by the invitation from Bianca to be part of this panel. Being a citizen of Aotearoa, New Zealand, there's a lot of discourse in our country about colonization and about reconciliation and about multiculturalism, even within our own relatively small country. And it's been on my heart a lot over the last few years as myself and my organization Greater Than get more involved in working with organizations, founders, leaders, teams, humans in China, in India, in different parts of the Asian world, and how crunchy it is, you know, just being completely honest. Coming to this work with that level of, I guess, awareness around the traps and the pitfalls of being a white person working in countries that have been oppressed for generations and maybe even millennia, comes with it great responsibility. And so I think that the opportunity to have these conversations with people that I think, if not strive to have the consciousness to understand that these questions need to be part of this discourse, is very enlivening and very vital. So thanks, Bianca, and thanks everyone else. And who's next on your screen, Bianca?
Spring was next.
Thank you. 大家好. I just want to greet everyone Chinese here with my native language, and then I'll switch to English. I am Spring Cheng, but I live in the West Coast of United States. I'm actually really touched with what Susan has shared. I felt the dynamics of colonization and oppression and what can come out of that as a tension point has been a theme, a thread running through my life. One of my particular passion is the revival of the Chinese indigenous wisdom, the Taoism, and how that can apply to this. When we are, as a global community, as a global village, we are facing such large-scale crisis between the relationship between humanity and the ecosystem, the climate, and nature as a whole. That's, I feel like there's so much potency and treasure from our native, the indigenous knowledge that can offer, and yet it remains largely invisible, primarily because the tremendous cultural and also temporal gap. So it has been my purpose mission to walk in between the void of that East and West, the ancient and the modern, and how to burst old in a new way so that it can interface with the current world. So, thank you.
Yeah, Yiqing, you want to go next?
Sure. 大家好，早上好，中午好，下午好。Hello world. Okay, I'm in Cheng. I'm currently traveling. Actually, I want to prepare for this. So I booked a big room, but unfortunately, my background cannot be changed. So just apologize. Yeah, I really like the beautiful background all of you had. Anyway, what brings me here, I think, is the curiosity. Maybe that is the first thing. Having been in the corporate world for many years, for dozens of years, I've always want to explore what is the fundamentals, what are the essential thing that can really help people, help organizations thrive. So that is my purpose. And I've already been on the quest to find the real power that can really make people connect. And that's the reason for me to step on the cheer journey. So for today's, I'm very privileged to be invited for this panel because as an OD consultant, I've been always trying to find what's the best way to bring people together. And every time when I was trying to find an answer, and I was following many traditions, spiritual traditions, and also I try to find academic traditions. And now more and more when I was asking the question, what is the best practice? What is the what really works for bring people for bring this wholeness into the workplace? And people always find that you should go back to to your own tradition. You need to go to the Lao Tzu, Yijing, and all the things. So that really sparks my curiosity. Even I am Chinese, I know very little about the traditional culture, all this wisdom. But I am a Chinese. So today I wish with Spring Presence, with Susan and Tim and Bianca, I think we could start a space for us to co-explore, and so that it is maybe it's not just East or West, it's our common wisdom. So that is my curiosity, and very privileged.
I'm already so touched, and we're just starting. I'm feeling a lot of things that actually start with East and West, but are actually beyond East and West, and this is what brought us together. So maybe to start off with our first question, and also give a little bit of context. So in our pre-panel, we actually talked a lot about all the different, and it's definitely a lot of potent directions we could go in a panel like East meets West, looking at you from around the world. Things came up like maybe we could talk about like the relationship between the me and the we, right? As an individual being part of a larger whole. Maybe we could also talk about freedom and responsibility, which actually is experienced very different in the East versus in the West, as we discovered in our pre-panel. Or we could talk about how we deal with harmony and conflict differently. And these are all really, really potent topics. Any one of them probably was more than 1 hour. But then interestingly, in the end, we actually reached this place that felt really, really complete and holistic in a way, and maybe even encompassing all of those different directions, which is like, in the end, we just landed at this place that maybe we should just talk about wholeness, like, and what that actually means for us, both individually, but also culturally speaking. How might we experience wholeness differently in the East, in the West, and what are some of the unique challenges, and what can we learn from each other? So, and we fully trust that all of these topics are fully whole and holistic, and that starting from one place will definitely lead to all the other places. So I think, like, if I may, I will then put the first question into our dialogue. I always imagine that
real dialogue like a melting pot where each person brings in their unique sauce and unique ingredient, and the end becomes something much more yummier and delicious than if anyone cooked it by themselves. So I'm gonna throw in a question as our starting kind of ingredient, and I think it would be like really starting from like what comes to your mind and when you think about wholeness, and less in a conceptual way, more maybe in a embodied experiential way, because I know for a fact that all four of you are already practitioners, like in the East and West, even across the East and West, really bring about more teal individuals and organizations and wholeness and everything. So like, what does it feel like for you on a day-to-day basis? And what are some maybe things you feel like could be different given that you come from the East or West or your unique cultural background? Yeah, and I will suggest a order that's different from the one before, but it's not enforced. Yeah, maybe Yiqing, like if you would like to start.
Sure. This is one of the topics that have always been on my curiosity. My personal experience of wholeness actually, it's been a journey. At the very beginning, I was true believer of purpose driven. Even as a or as an organization, I think purpose is one of the, maybe it's not the only thing. At the very beginning, I was really believe in the power of purpose, so that they can really think that is. So I was then that was the first thing really sparked me into this OD era. But later, when I work with clients, work with the organization, I think purpose is not all of them, and actually profit is also very important, right? I kind of actually that was huge finding for me.
I feel Yiqing's voice is a little broken. Do you?
Yiqing's voice is a little bit cut off, and we have someone who's not on mute. Yeah, okay, they're on mute now.
Yeah. Is it better now?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, maybe it was just a noise.
Okay. So I'll continue, right? So my experience of wholeness actually include it's a journey for me, starting with the purpose, and then I find the organizations and the people, the purpose is not enough, and then I was coming to a turning point. Purpose needs plus something, maybe profit, maybe something else. So that's just my current thinking. We need a purpose, and we need values, and we need more of them, so that we can really face reality together. So yeah, so that's for me, from my current understanding of the purpose, especially in the OD area. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you're exploring what is behind purpose. Yeah. Anything you want to add, Yiqing?
Yeah, so that's my professional experience. My personal experience, when I think of wholeness, is the something that we have this intimate relationship with myself, with others, and with the world. If I do not have that relationship, I think sometimes we are living in a bubble, right? We are not living in the real world. So purpose, in a way, is it needs a lot of things for us to stay on the ground, and also to face the reality, and also to have the courage to live up our dreams. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that personal addition. Yeah. Maybe Spring?
Yeah, thank you. I was still reflecting on Yiqing's journey. So maybe I share a little bit of my journey. So this is interesting. My entry into the experience of wholeness actually starts with my career as an acupuncturist. So I think in the OD world, people are very familiar with this metaphor of acupuncture for the system. So in a way, it's wholeness at its application. It's how do we influence a system as a being? How do we first get in touch with our own presence as embodied wholeness, and with that presence, we influence the system as a being, as an organism. I think there are many directions I can go, but I think I will pick two that struck out right now regarding my experience with wholeness, especially with this cultural different, maybe slightly different cultural. I wouldn't say it's difference, but the propensity that I experienced in the Eastern culture versus propensity I experienced in the Western culture. I feel like in the especially the ancient Eastern culture, wholeness is something that's we're born with, something is already there, it's already in us from the very beginning of our life. And it's interesting that as we develop the developmental journey at the beginning is actually a departure from that original wholeness. And then at some point in the middle, there will be a turnaround where we actually returning to a wholeness, but at a different level, at a different octave, or at a different note. So, but at the same time, but you can think of it as we arrive at a different level, but also you can think of it actually we're returning to where the roots come from. So that's one. I think in practicality, it's like in life, me and, for example, my team, that we were working together and we run into some conflict or tension. At the beginning, we'll be immersed in that pull and the tension and the dissonance. But at some point, someone will, or some switch will turn on in the system, or reminding ourselves, how can we resource that wholeness? It's actually already there, but we forgot. What are some of the practices? And many of them are actually embodied practice that can lead us back to that wholeness is already present. And from there, with that resource, we'll find new ways to find our way back into a renewed sense of wholeness. So in a way, I feel, so that's the first point, is wholeness is something, it's always present, but it takes practice. It takes a lot of practice for us to remember that, to kind of leave that track of polarization or separation and go and come back to that turnaround. It's like a highway. You have to get off that highway and take the exit to turn around. And the second point I think I want to bring out is that for me, the developmental journey, it's not a linear ascending, but it's actually wholeness is actually embodied at every stage in a fractal way. I mean, life itself is actually a manifestation of wholeness. It's the fact that we're here breathing and talking and heart pumping. The life itself organized. Our body wouldn't be here if it's not self-organizing and driven by its purpose to live out its vitality. So there's no stage that's not wholeness. But our mental, our cognitive structure may or may not catch on with what wholeness is present in the moment. So we're always learning from ourselves, from the life process. And I think it's almost like, there are two attitudes in wholeness. One is that it's a relaxed, like we are already here. And another one is like, it's in front and let's go there. And in fact, wholeness is this oscillatory process between these. It's like a breathing breath process, like taking in a breath and then relax, and taking in a breath and relax. So
Totally. Yeah, I love that, Spring. You just went right in. I think the 2 points that you brought up are exactly the potent edges that I personally experienced when looking at wholeness from the East and West. I still remember looking at Keegan's model, thinking, is that really like that? Is that really step by step and like this really far away goal, or is it more about returning out to our childlike state? Yeah, so
yeah,
definitely more to unpack there.
yeah, that's the in Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu said, the wholeness is like returning to the childlike origin.
Yeah, we have a Chinese word for it, which is, it sounds beautiful. It's Fan Pu Wei Zhen, right? But I think we would go into that for now. I would love to like maybe also hear from Tim now, like, because I'm sure like these were very fresh angles, I assume, and why you stayed up this late. Like what you can already add, like what are some things that are bubbling up for you hearing these like different angles, but then also like what has your own experience been, because like at the end of the day, like East West are just labels. Like what has your own journey of like wholeness been, and like what are some of your insights on it? Yeah.
Thank you, Branka. And I think, just listening to the last 10 minutes is exactly, I think, the kind of conversation that we need to have in a way. And it's growing up in Germany, little village, that's 365 people here, and then moving to Shanghai somewhat 15 years back for a while, living in a house that obviously has hosted more people than living in my whole village has been, an interesting experience in itself. And then you just see, or at least for me, it was also, there's so many more things that we don't even think about, because we get primed in a certain way, by obviously upbringing, but also by school, by educational life and all that kind of stuff. And I think what's interesting is if we just listening to you, Spring, as well. I mean, wholeness, kind of German engineering type of system in a way. Wholeness is nothing that you would learn. It's almost the other way around, actually. And so you get untrained almost in that kind of stuff, especially embodiment kind of practices. And just talk about myself, I don't know, it's nothing I would have even thought about, I guess, for whatever 30 years of my life at least. And what is interesting, obviously kids do that. So I do have 2 little kids, 3 and 4 years old, and you can see that they still do that naturally. And it gets less and less already with kindergarten age now. So it's also interesting to see what happens there. But this is one of the things why I think these kind of conversations are so interesting, because from a arrogant Western perspective, is always like, well, how can teal work? Because self-management, egalitarian is not necessarily how we look at to all sorts of political systems, right? Not only Eastern systems, obviously, we have that in the Western part as well. And then you're like, yeah, that might or might not be true. First of all, it's a different definition of hierarchy, probably in many cultures. If you compare that, US German one is already quite different, actually. Or the other way around, you could also say, well, if you look at the dimensions of teal in a way, like wholeness, for example, I would say we actually have a big gap that we need to close. And Frederick Laloux earlier today, or in fact yesterday, for me, said, how do I make sure that I'm not that tree-hugging esoteric guy with my friends when I talk about it? So this is almost kind of the conversation, and this is already interesting. And in our little pre-discussion, I think one thing for me is always you can't intellectually deductively explain that to people. It's just what it is. So the only way you can do it is you can either experience it by visiting the world, and I don't think about myself as German. I don't even think about myself as European in a way. Or the other way around, you just have a conversation. This is why these places are actually so beautiful.
And I love, Tim, that you also brought out the aspect of wholeness that's just about being a unique individual in the world anywhere we go, right? We're always different. And it's like in the court, it takes to be different. Cool. And then maybe Susan? I could see Susan smiling as we were speaking.
Yeah, super rich. Like I feel like I've got the privilege of kind of drawing some of these strands together, like Yiqing talking about your journey and the realization that purpose without something to attach it to, whether it's profit or whatever that is, you know, whether we like it or not, we are all operating in a system that depends on us to create and consume. And, you know, Spring's share about the wholeness and the fact that life itself is a fractal, is a microcosm for wholeness. And that kind of leads me back to my nonstop obsession with the idea of livelihood and even the word livelihood, the etymology of livelihood. And thinking about that in the context of teal, I'm sure that probably, well, maybe I'm assuming or projecting that most of the people here in this community on this call came to teal as a, maybe very simply speaking, like an antidote to the suffering caused by the predominant paradigm of rational masculine organizing. And I think that we've got both an opportunity and a obligation to be really practical about how we share these things in light of our businesses, in our participation as citizens in which is currently a predominantly capitalist society or environment. And just a little kind of addition for me is it's always so enlivening and overwhelming and a little bit intimidating for me doing work in places like India or China, where that remembering and that knowing, that's like this unbroken line, right? And it just feels like it exists within everybody. But the challenge, and I guess I don't want to call it a critique, but because that's so clear, it seems to be bifurcated from the work. And what I notice is that in Asian cultures, it seems to be less likely or harder for the idea that we can bring that part of our lives to the work, because work is rigid, constrained, straight up and down. So that I'm curious about, especially from you, Spring, Bianca, Yiqing, what do you think what have you seen as the possibility for bringing that very vibrant, alive sense of, I don't want to call it spirituality, but it's because it's more than that, like the inner knowing of what wholeness is to this world of commerce and capitalism?
A potent question. Spring or Yiqing, like who wants to pick up?
Maybe I can start. Yes, spirituality is essential. I mean, if you really want people to experience that wholeness in the workplace. But the problem is that we cannot talk, about spirituality for business people, because that will scare them away. They will feel that this is something we shouldn't talk about it, but we need it. So that's the dilemma. So our experience is we always, when especially when we were working with a group of people, and we always start with their own desire or their own aspiration, their true purpose or their vision of a better world, and we start from there, and then we kind of inspire them. We kind of facilitate them to tell stories, and when they tell their own stories, and they have this connection to the real world, to the real clients, to the real, to the reality, then at a certain point something suddenly change, they will touch into something deeper in their heart, and then the bubble will, actually I always believe that the opposite of wholeness is fragmentation, and when people are pretending, they will withdraw from each other. So when they tell their true stories, their true passion, and then they are likely to embark on this quest on the wholeness. Yeah, so that's just my experience by working closely with leadership team. This years.
Yeah, resonate quite a lot, and I would love to hear Spring's maybe in the Spring actually has this unique position of being a Chinese of cultural heritage, but then also working in both the West and in the East, right? Like,
yeah. So I really appreciate what Yiqing has described. I think what Yiqing described is actually spirituality at work. It's not about talking about spirituality, but actually, I think the bottom of spirituality is actually caring and compassion. And he's not, what he talk about is not like a, I was reading some of the things in the chat, and I saw that one question, like why talking about spirituality scare people? And it's just my take. And I think sometimes because the Spiritualities Institute has a patriarch influence in it, and there's a sense that people don't like to be told what to do. People don't like to be preached, but people respond to be listened to and to be nurtured and to be feel seen. So that's I think that's what I see in what Yiqing has shared. And I want to also take another angle from what another angle different from what Yiqing shared, is that, oops, I saw the screen jump and
yeah.
Susan got yeah.
I'm sure she'll come back again.
Okay. Is that I think another so that another thing I always want to remind myself is that there's a lot of incredible teachings for spirituality, that the more I embody it myself, the less reactive I become to outside world. And frankly, I still have a lot of reaction towards capitalistic, towards consumer culture. But I more and more realize this is part of my own work too, that there's, and I just recently, in the last year, I think, I start to, actually cultivate what I can appreciate of some of the things I used to have so much resentment and reactivity against, and it's a practice. Like, what can I receive from, for example, capitalism? what is the gift that it actually provides? And I think I'm trying to practice this principle, like by receiving the world as it is, it actually probably provides a great because I think the evolution actually happens on its own. It's a very Taoism attitude. It's like, it's not trying to push and influence things, but how do I get out of the way so that things can happen more on its own accord? So yeah, so it's almost like the other end of what Yiqing talks about is, how do I really take care of myself, my own heart and being, so that I can be of service to people at where they are.
Beautiful. And I love, Spring, what you shared about spirituality can also be something that doesn't have to be talked about, but actually just embodied.
Mm-hmm.
And just to add, and like, I think it was actually Susan's question, right? Like in my observation in like the Eastern kind of hemisphere right now, is that It is a
波的召
combination.
唤的效果怎么样？
Oh, I think our internet
Someone-
is
对吧？
outside
好，
of our channel.
Someone. Mhm.
Can you still hear? Can you help?
I think it's good again. All good.
Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, I just wanted to add that it's like really interesting on one hand, and I also saw what Tim wrote in the chat box. I totally agree. It's a very universal thing right now. This is probably something that we discovered that we share in the East, West, North, like South, globally, no matter where. This is what humanity is going through right now. There's like, on one hand, like calling and passion and fascination of spirituality, and on the other hand, maybe this almost instant reactive fear. And maybe like what I really resonate with is it actually maybe starts with having so much compassion that you find the language to spirituality that doesn't need to even mention spirituality, because at the end of the day, it is just about being able to live in compassion with yourself and all of life, right? Susan's back. So that's one thing. That's like how we carry spirituality. Maybe it's actually one of the most grounded things to how you live mindfully in your own life and in your relationships. But then the other angle that I saw here in China specifically is we do have different traditions when it comes to spirituality. We have the Confucianism, we have Taoism, and of course Buddhism is a big influence in China. And what I also noticed is that oftentimes there are for example, there are very naturalistic angles to Taoism. And then for Buddhism, there are very philosophical angles. And especially for Confucianism, it's actually a very grounded, very humanistic approach to spirituality that often tends to reach people quite well. And I'm also quite curious, like, what are things like similarly or differently in the West? But since we're also now moving into our, I hope, second before last round of questions, I don't know if that's ambitious. I wanted to also move a little bit now into more the practicality of things. Like I remember in our pre-panel talking about, on one hand, it's fascinating to learn about how we approach, how we both experience it differently, but also how we approach it differently, right? And the next layer would obviously be now, like being in this ongoing process of learning about wholeness, how can we actually promote practices that both lead to more wholeness within ourselves, but then also like maybe it's less about promoting, like how do we especially as TATW practitioners, right? That's actually the key of our work. How do we actually embody wholeness more within ourselves when we are at work, so to speak, in all these different organizations and coaching conversations? Like how can we actually embody more of that wholeness, and what can we learn from each other in these kind of dialogues that we're having today? So kind of moving more into a practical realm now. And now I'm just gonna trust our field to have the wisdom who wants to speak first.
Spring, you look ready. Go for it. It's okay.
I was actually thinking you should speak because I don't think I was gonna say I vote for Tim.
Sure. Tim?
We can also do that, I think. Practices, it kind of comes back to what you said before, Bianca, right? There's so many different sources that we can draw from, and I think one of the realizations is that, I mean, not even East versus West, right? Just within my household, if you think about my wife and myself, we're both German. Even there, I think it doesn't make sense that we would do the same practice. So because we're just fundamentally different. And she drives me nuts with all sorts of things, and she would drive me nuts with her embodiment, wholeness, whatever practices, for sure, and probably the other way around too. So I do think it's important that we just be aware of that and say, well, there's all sorts of practices, and some might feel right, and actually some might feel right for me in that moment, and didn't feel maybe a year ago, and will not feel right again a year from now. So I think keeping that openness and not just say it needs to be this or that and that's the right way is I think a really important part of the conversation. And I think just individually, personally speaking, I think it's also important to keep that openness, which is probably yeah, one of the more difficult things is, not only staying open to the world, but staying open to challenge my own beliefs. I think this is obviously one of the critical ones as well. And so I wouldn't have, that is the one practice that I recommend everyone to do, because I don't think it exists actually. I don't know if that's a satisfying answer. I'm sorry for that.
That's a very teal answer, or
Thank
maybe
you.
rainbow answer, like we're talking about in the pre-panel. But can I just add, like, what would you say is most effective in your own integration, like in terms of challenging your own beliefs, just to ground it a little bit more?
Yeah. So just for me personally, so I'm not much of a reader, and I'm not much into whatever these kind of things. So I just talk to people, and I try to find people who are different to me, because this is I mean, typical social media risk that we have these days, right? Social media algorithms work in a way that you just are in your little bubble. So it's kind of reinforcing what you already know and reinforcing beliefs. So how do you break out of that is one of the questions, right? And so this is what I try to do consciously. Some of you know that together with a guy called Frank, who's actually up now as well, it seems, here in Switzerland, and joined. So he and I, we are pretty different in many ways, and really complementary. And I think, while I drive him nuts, and the other way around from time to time, also just this week, in fact, we had a conversation about that. It's exactly that. He keeps challenging me, and so surrounding myself with people and kind of consciously build an environment where there is complementary points of views, or also just this intercultural type of exchange that we are having as well, where I know that, Bianca, you and I, we had some nice conversations years ago already, and it challenged some of my beliefs on wholeness, and this is, I think, exactly what I would say is a good practice. Talk to each other, and then find out what might be there.
So could I just say it's seeking conversations with people who drive you nuts, and people who quite obviously
Probably.
have a different,
Probably that is the essence of it, exactly. Yeah.
I like that. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I'll
No, go
pop
ahead.
just because it's coming to me, and I'm going to answer this question in a way that I've never answered before. So I just want to feel the energy around it, like thinking about, like, what is the most human common denominator? What is the one thing that we all do? We all breathe, right? And so for me, and I don't know why I'm even fearful sharing this, because in some places, I think it's even as scary as trying to bring spirituality into the room. But the idea of sitting together and taking some breaths together is the most powerful practice. We are constantly walking around in a state of reactivity, and we can't be whole if we're just constantly responding to stimuli. And so sitting quietly, feet on the floor, take 3 breaths, don't make a big deal out of it. I think that's where we can start.
So beautiful.
I can jump in.
Yes, feel free to.
Yeah, I always have this vision, this image of, actually we are living in 2 worlds, right? In one world, we kind of like we are living in a bubble. We do not encounter each other. This is a world of fragmentation. This is, we have a lot of worries, fears, and all this thing. In another world, maybe that's a teal-like world. We have spirituality in workplace, right? Each of us can embody this wholeness. So the challenge is how can we, how can we move, how can we step by step move from this world to that world? One practice that I truly believe is dialogue. This dialogue is not just like, those talk, discussion, around the topic and even not win-win negotiation. Is a dialogue that we can truly see each other. We know where you're from, where I'm from, and we can really safely challenge each other's beliefs so that we can, burst our bubble, right? And we can really meet each other. So dialogue is one of the practice that I have always I try to promote in workplace, especially when people are in challenges, So 3 things for me, I think, is back to the wholeness topic. I think as organization, I'm sensing that 3 things are essential. And these 3 things always start with truth. The first is true purpose. Purpose is really important. So through dialogue, how can we find where, why we exist, right? So that is the source of the power, can really inspire people to go beyond ourselves, our current condition. And the second thing is the true beliefs. This belief is not illusion, but we go deep into our our own desire, and then to build things based on our common beliefs. And the third thing I think is most important is true relationship. And because we need a group of people who have this intimate relationship, so that we can trust each other, we can build a better world together. So actually, this framework I learned from Spring. The heaven, the earth, and the middle level, right? 3 level. The purpose is really from spirituality. It's not what we want, it's really what the world wants from us. And the beliefs is really from our value system. Our relationship is really the nurturing, is the ground for all of us. And for an organization to thrive, we need these 3 things. And dialogue is one of the essential practice to bring us there. Yeah, so that's my 3 things.
Oh, quite powerful. Spring?
Wow. They all said what I want to say. What's left?
Really? No, I trust you still have more wholeness practices.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Well, it's like everyone is like, oh, tick that, tick that, tick that. Well, I guess what else I can say? I think Susan shared, she shared breathing. So maybe I'll go even one step further than that. Is that it's always like I'm wondering, do I share some practice I do in my own world, or share something that's safer for the more predominant paradigm? so I'm gonna take an audacious step.
In the spirit of wholeness.
In the spirit of is that embody the things that cannot be truly fully articulated. It's there's this whole world of practice called applied theater. I don't know if people are, the improvisational theater actually has a tremendous potential and application in the business world, where we actually use more of a physicality and nonverbal expression to capture all those things, because our language is beautiful and great, but there are also other dimensions of our being that just cannot be fully captured or less efficiently with language. That I think even if sometimes I lead people doing this exercise, even just a simple brief moment of experience, if people can embody that energy, that allows us to see so much into our humanity and attune to that shared presence, shared breathing, shared being. I think we are so in need of that nourishment so that we can safely explore all these, differences and challenges. In Chinese, we have saying 求同存异. We cultivate what's shared so that we can contain what's different. So often I think in our, predominant paradigm, there's a lot of differences, a lot of polarities, but the foundation of what's shared is same. And that's what breaks up the relationship and makes the organization less vital. So that's always I say, cultivate the soil. Let's just feel our humanity together.
We are actually reaching our end. And so just to like also name what we have in our pot at this point, I love that we have very much body-oriented practice, very embodied practices, not just the breathing, but also theater and play that Spring brought up. And we also have what Yiqing brought up, which is about really human relating and dialogue. And Timm's very practical approach, which is just talk to lots of people that are different from you, right? And if I might add, like my personal practice, I was reflecting while listening to you guys, and I realized for me, actually, it's not just having dialogue like the one we had today, but actually making it a way of living, like a way of life, to as much as I can to always show up fully, maybe in the fullest version as I can, and then notice the fears, and then looking at my own fears. So I love that both Susan and Spring today really beautifully modeled that. Both of you decided to share a personal practice of wholeness of yours that maybe you normally don't share in public. And I just feel how much more deep and touching and whole our conversation has become. And yet at the same time, I feel like we just started this conversation between the East and West and looking at wholeness. So maybe if I may, I would like to just like use one more minute for each one of you, maybe to share one word that you take away from our dialogue today, and maybe one word that you hope to maybe bring to next year.
I can start. The word that I'm taking away from this last hour is solidarity. And my word for the year is grace. What about you, Tim?
I was just thinking that's such a difficult question at 2:30 a.m. after whatever 14 hours being online. But and because there's like a million words that you could use actually here. I think I'll take away breathing. Susan, always a good reminder. So thank you for that. And for next year, I would say more dialogue. Okay, that's 2 words. I'm cheating, but let's just say dialogue. Spring, you want to go next?
Let's see. Gosh, there's I'm having a jam here. There are too many words competing for. I think for this year, I feel I'm gonna cheat again. There's a phrase instead of one word. Gratitude for a birthing. I feel like we're birthing something, and there's so much gratitude that this happened, and we're holding something probably bigger than what we're aware of. And for the next year is like wide open-eyed, what could be possible next, emerging. Yeah.
Yiqing?
Yeah. So one word, I would say practice. Especially personal practice. If we can embody, or if we can really live up, that wholeness, so that we can maybe we have better chance to make a better world. So for the next year, I hope, dialogue, more dialogue. Yeah.
So you share Tim's model. So I guess I can safely count that we will have a continuation of looking at you from around the world, right, Tim?
Hopefully, yes, indeed.
Yes. Yeah, and I see people smiling in the gallery view, so I think it's a shared yearning. So just to end with my 2 words, first word is definitely gratitude. I also have a feeling we just opened and started something. And the word for next year is actually deepening. I feel like I have yearning for deepening this dialogue. We're really touching onto something very beautiful, important, and alive. So really hope to see everyone next year, but also really grateful for everyone who came this year. As Jonas just beautifully said, to be continued, and hope to see you all in all the different sessions today. Like we have many more sessions with Asian speakers, Chinese speakers, very global citizen speakers such as Jonas himself. And so hope to see you guys in the remainder of the conference, but then also hopefully next year with more and more dialogues. Yeah, so thank you, Tim, Susan, Spring, Yiqing. It was such an honor. And yeah, let's breathe.